Read a second time. I call the member for Balmain.
Thank you very much, Mr Temporary Speaker, and I appreciate the opportunity to make a brief contribution to the Residential Tenancies and Housing Legislation Amendment Public Housing Anti-Social Behaviour Bill. Mr Temporary Speaker, I wanted to echo the comments of the member for Newtown. The member for Newtown, who has led for the Greens on this matter, has very eloquently put forward the serious concerns that we have about this bill. She has highlighted, as I will do so now, the improvements that are being proposed around this bill, and they're improvements that might not have had to have been introduced if there had been widespread consultation on the matter. When it comes to the issue of public housing, social housing, it's clear from my experience that a lot of the issues that we see around antisocial behaviour are a function of the crisis in social housing. We saw the Auditor General's report outline very clearly the crisis that we see in public housing back in 2013. That between 1945 and 1995, the proportion of social housing as a proportion of all housing was increasing. So there was investment in public housing. And that investment was well received by the public and meant people, for example, like my parents, working class family, were offered public housing. Many years ago, offered public housing. They chose not to take public housing. Instead, they chose to enter the rental market themselves. But now, a working class family with one person working with 4 kids, they would never have an opportunity to enter public housing in any reasonable time frame. Because we've seen over the last decade in particular a decreasing proportion of public housing properties as a proportion of all stock of public housing. So we can see the total stock of public housing is reducing when you look at the total stock of housing. And we know that the Land and Housing Corporation is selling twice as many properties as they're building. There is a crisis in public housing, and it's getting worse because we are also seeing the increase in the cost of housing. So those people who are financially unable to commit to rental property or to buy their own property are finding it harder and harder to find somewhere to live. And we know also from the Auditor General's report that the number of tenants that are being housed is also falling. It's at one of its lowest numbers over many decades. And so it's clear that the source of so much tension in public housing is that the people who we are entering into the public housing system as new tenants are the most needy, with the most complex needs, with the most challenging situation. And we're loading those most high needs people in a smaller and smaller amount of public housing as a proportion of all of the housing in this state. So it's no surprise that we're often seeing people with mental health issues, people who have gone through a great deal of trauma and difficulty in their lives, housed next to people who also have very serious issues, and the lack of the wraparound services that need to exist to support these tenants is at the heart of the problem around public housing. And we hear a lot of people talk about public and social housing. I still call it public housing because when I speak to public tenants, they still talk about their housing commission. And public housing makes sense to people in the public, and public housing, I think, makes sense to many people in terms of the government-owned housing. But let's not, there's been a lot of people criticising the coalition government. Let's not forget when the Liberals came to office, when the coalition came to office, there was a $300 million backlog in maintenance under Labor. So this is not something where we just kick the coalition and kick the Liberal Party about this. There's been a history, or kick the minister, there's been a history of a lack of support for public housing, a lack of support. And that goes at the heart of what kind of Australia, what kind of state we want to have. In my view, one of the wealthiest countries in the world, we should be able to support people in affordable and public housing. In particular, it's my view that that's a right, and it's something that we should support and uphold. And that means we need to invest in public housing. We're dealing with the symptoms with this bill of a problem which is generated because of the lack of investment in public housing. I know the Premier made an announcement about this $1 billion housing fund, this kind of thought bubble, about doing a $1 billion housing fund, but we haven't seen what that actually is. We understand the government's not investing any of the proceeds from the privatisation of that fund, so that's a question that I think we need to be grappling with. We need to have different models in terms of public housing provision, but we need to have something which actually at the bottom line comes to who's putting the money in, where's the money coming from, and in our mind, we can find the money, don't worry. In our minds, Well, we wouldn't be giving a $300 million tax reduction to the poker machine industry. That's the first thing we wouldn't do. So there's $300 million for public housing. Yeah, we could talk about that for a long time. But, Mr. Temporary Speaker, the issue about this, I think, is a pressing one. The challenge that we have is to be supporting public housing tenants. And I just wanted to take just 1 minute just to address what I think is an excellent initiative from the department, and that is about the area tenants groups. The area tenants groups have come together and expressed to me, and I regularly attend their meetings, concerns that they have. This includes antisocial behaviour. The Glebe Area Tenants Group in particular, Kerry Bartholomew, Murray White, Galen Harkin and Marla Priest, these are people who are public housing tenants who are working as advocates and supporters for their own community. And it's a model, I think, that is being rolled out, I know, and is being well supported in my area for support. And the Joanna O'Day and Alexandra Dwelling Advocacy Group, that group, which has had a lot of work done on behalf of the Glebe Community Development Project with Margot Ralston and people like Michael Reeves, have done a great job in facilitating getting public housing tenants engaged in the tenancy, supporting their local community and coming forth and highlighting problems. The Joanna O'Day building, people may know, hundreds and hundreds of single bedroom apartments in one big block in Camperdown, and that has seen a lot of issues in the past, but getting tenants active is really important. The Inner West Tenants Group, Sarah Mitchell, Susan Hawkswood, Natalie Starr, Matthew Liotta, Malcolm Waldron, Deirdre Hoskin, Murray Truzichancho and Lisa Smolov on behalf of the Roseville Neighbourhood Centre. They're working to address antisocial behaviour in a collaborative way, working to give people the services that they need when they are having problems, or working with the police, which I have done, to make sure that we can take action against antisocial behaviour. So, Mr. Temporary Speaker, my wish to focus with the Minister is, Minister, we know that there is a crisis in social and public housing. It takes an investment. We need more diverse ranges of housing opportunities. And I'll finish on this point. Vesting of title is an important step that needs to be taken, but it needs to be done properly. So the contracts are done well, so they're tight, so we can see an increase in the overall amount of housing. And as many know, our view on affordable housing is that in multi-unit developments, developers should be forced to provide a proportion of that development for affordable housing, our social housing. So, Mr. Temporary Speaker, I wanted to thank those people in my community that work to support social and public housing, commit myself to continue that, and look forward to the debate to make sure we can make a bill that needs improvement as good as possible.